Hey everybody. So I'm going to take a little bit of time in this video to go over the song lyrics that you were asked to read for last week's discussion. If you remember, that song was Brenda's Got a Baby by Tupac. If you missed last week's discussion, you can still read the poem and listen, and then watch this video. The lyrics are attached in the instructions here, so you can go ahead and at least read them. And what the discussion prompt asked you last week was not really to look at the elements of poetry like we have with a lot of the other song lyrics. Last week I asked you to really just hone in on what you thought the underlying message was and what additional sort of sub-themes were touched on in the lyrics. And then I also asked you to just give me, explain what your personal response was to the song. So, if you missed last week's discussion, pause the video, read the lyrics, and think about those questions. What do you think is the message? What other topics are kind of hinted at along the way? And then what was your personal reaction to the lyrics? So I asked you what you thought the underlying theme was, what the message was, or what topic we were dealing with, and some other subtopics that may have been mentioned or touched on throughout the lyrics. Because I don't think this is a set of lyrics that are necessarily difficult to understand. These are probably the most straightforward lyrics that we have read so far. Maybe Lose Yourself by Eminem, that was somewhat straightforward as well, but I really think this one gets even more to the heart of the matter. This is not necessarily a set of lyrics that open themselves to multiple interpretations like some of our other songs have, like Down in a Hole, where, you could take it many different ways. These lyrics are very straightforward. There is a very crystal clear message, and you'd think that would make it less interesting, possibly, if there's no mystery, if there's nothing to figure out. Some of you may actually appreciate it more that it's pretty straightforward. You don't have to work so hard to figure out what the heck's going on. Both of those are valid reactions, but don't let it fool you that it's, because it's easier to figure out and understand, that it's less magnificent, because it's truly, it's a pretty powerful song. I asked you what the theme was, or what the topic was, and then what are some other sort of subtopics that are mentioned. And clearly, the catalyst for the lyrics is that Brenda's got a baby. How did she get the baby? Well, she's a very young Brenda, right? 12. And she has been sexually involved with her cousin, and she got pregnant. And it's about so much more, though, than just Brenda having this baby. Because she has this baby and she has no help, no idea what to do. And because she has no help, she is pretty desperate to simply survive and take care of this infant. And she tries, to do so in a couple different ways, and none of them work out. And eventually she's found murdered. And it's a very sad song. But at the same time, I think there's so much realism in it. It's one of those things where if you don't know any better, you hear the song or you read the lyrics and you think that, it's just impossible that this could really happen. And not only does it happen, but it happens way more often than it should. I mean, it shouldn't happen ever at all. but it happens more often than I think a lot of people realize. So all the different topics that he touches on in these lyrics. He starts off by saying, I hear Brenda's got a baby, but Brenda's barely got a brain. A damn shame the girl can hardly spell her name. That's not our problem. That's up to Brenda's family. So it's hard to tell exactly what he's getting at there. It could mean simply that she's uneducated. So education might be a subtopic that is hinted at here at the beginning. Maybe Brenda has some sort of developmental disability. I think it's possible. Certainly, would also add to her susceptibility, her vulnerability, to find herself in the situations that she does. So maybe it's also a comment on no support if you have children like that. Could it also simply be that it's her age that he's really referring to? She's barely got a brain, like she's only 12. I think she'd be able to spell her name though. So I'm leaning more towards the first two possibilities. And my heart tells me that it's really more about education. But I wouldn't count out that it could also be a comment on, the kind of support that's available when you're in areas of poverty and you have children and family members that need that extra support and assistance, and it's nowhere to be found. I still think it's probably education, though. Lack of education, right? So that's the first thing that's hit on, right? Well, let me show you how it affects the whole community. And that's sort of the telling line out of the whole song is, it's not just about this girl. Yes, her story is sad and tragic, and we are supposed to feel for her, but his whole point is that, you can't just say, oh, it's so unfortunate that this girl found herself in this situation, because it's affecting way more than just her. So I think that's a super important line to pay attention to. Let me show you how it affects the whole community. Now, Brenda really never knew her moms. We kind of hear about her mother later, so it would seem that her mom is around. But doesn't really know her. So around but absent in some way. Right? Her dad was a junkie, went in death to his arms. So we've got two other issues that are being hinted at here. So a lack of parental involvement for some reason. Could it be that mom is working all the time to try to make ends meet, and so Brenda doesn't see her very often? Could it be that mom is, trying to find a man? Could it be that mom is into drugs as well? Could it be the mom just doesn't care? Whatever the reason, we're definitely looking at lack of parental involvement from her mother. And then we have the father, right? Her dad was a junkie and went to death in his arms. It's sad because I bet Brenda doesn't even know. She probably doesn't even know what happened to her dad. So we have a lack of a father figure for those reasons, right? Drugs. Just because you're in the ghetto doesn't mean you can't grow. That's what Brenda doesn't know. Brenda doesn't know that just because you're in the ghetto doesn't mean you can't grow. You're going to read a poem next week that touches on that idea as well. So be thinking about that. Just because you're in the ghetto doesn't mean you can't grow. But oh, that's a thought. my own revelation. So I love the meta aspect of his lyrics, where, you know, he is rapping and then has his own thought in the middle of it, right? He has this epiphany, this revelation as he's, you know, singing the lyrics. You know, do whatever it takes to resist the temptation. So, a bit of advice there to try to lift yourself up out of that situation and grow, as he mentioned 2 lines before. Her boyfriend was her cousin. So, at this point in the song, we don't know how old she is. But we immediately know that something's not right if her boyfriend was her cousin. So, some sort of incestual relationship here. We actually find out a little bit more about it a little later on in the song. Alright, so we'll come back to that. Brenda got herself a boyfriend. Her boyfriend was her cousin. Now let's watch the joy end. She tried to hide her pregnancy from her family, who didn't really care to see or give a damn if she went out and had a church of kids, as long as when the check came, they got first dibs. Okay, so going back again to this theme of lack of support and lack of parental involvement, right? They don't care. They don't even pay attention to her enough to realize that she's pregnant. And even if they did realize, they wouldn't care as long as, you know, if she's getting government assistance, that they're getting it too. She tried to hide her pregnancy from her family, who didn't really care. So she's aware. You know, if she's trying to hide it, she must be aware. Alright, now Brenda's belly is getting bigger, but no one seems to notice any change in her figure. She's 12 years old, and she's having a baby, in love with the molester. So, now going back to where he talks about her boyfriend in the beginning, now we know she's only 12, and he downright refers to the cousin as a molester. So now we have another topic that has been introduced. You know, child molestation and sexual assault, right? And that nobody's paying attention, nobody's noticing. She's just left vulnerable and unprotected in so many ways. Yet she thinks that he'll be with her forever and dreams of a world with the two of them are together. Whatever, he left her, and she had the baby solo. She had it on the bathroom floor and didn't know. So she didn't know what to throw away and what to keep. She wrapped the baby up and threw him in the trash heap. She has no idea what's going on. She's probably terrified. Gosh, traumatic to say the least. And, you know, did she honestly want to throw the baby away? Did she simply really not understand what was happening? It's hard to say. It's tragic no matter what, though. You know, I guess she thought she'd get away, wouldn't hear the cries. She didn't realize how much the little baby had her eyes. It's my favorite part of the song because it's just heart-wrenching. Now the baby's in the trash heap bawling. Mama can't help her, but it hurts to hear her calling. Brenda wants to run away. Mama say you making me lose pay. The social workers here every day. Now Brenda's got to make her own way. So, again, she has no support whatsoever. No one cares about this girl. So she can't go to her family. They won't let her stay. No money, no babysitter. She couldn't keep a job. She tried to sell crack, but ended up getting robbed. So another theme touched on there. You know, in when you feel like you don't have any other choice, you know, you'll turn to doing things to survive that aren't good choices. Alright, so what's next? There ain't nothing left to sell. So she sees sex as a way of leaving hell. It's paying the rent, so she really can't complain. prostitute found slain, and Brenda's her name. She's got a baby. So, from start to finish, the song is just tragic. All those different themes that are hit on there. I mean, it's like he just... I mean, obviously the song is about Brenda. Brenda's got a baby. But it's about so much more than that. It is about everything that is happening in these communities, right? Because he even, like I said, he even said towards the beginning, let me show you how it affects the whole community. And, you know, if you're not paying attention, you're still reading the rest of the lyrics and hearing the rest of it and thinking, no, this is still just about Brenda. But no, his whole point is that this isn't just Brenda, you know? This story, we could change the name to any name, and it would still be a young girl's story, because so many of them share the same one. We could change the lyrics up a little bit and put a boy's name, right? And sure, there'd be a few differences, but the end result would still be the same. I mean, maybe he's not going to turn to prostitution and get murdered, but he's probably going to turn to something that could get him killed. You know, because what else are you going to do? You know? He tells us to resist the temptation, you know, and to realize that, you know, things in the ghetto can grow, but that's easier said than done, I'm sure. But the whole thing is just such a brilliant commentary on those communities and what is happening in them, and how every single bit of it is just wrong. And this brings me to bringing up slam poetry again, which we talked about a little bit last week when we went over the lyrics to Lose Yourself. And so I mentioned how slam poetry is, you know, like a battle. And there's audience participation, blah, blah, blah. And then in Lose Yourself, we were looking at a moment that he's talking about, and the literal moment was a rap battle. So we looked at sort of the connections, the similarities between rap battles and slam poetry. And there's a little more to slam poetry that I didn't talk about last week. And it's more about the themes, very common themes that are found in a lot of slam poetry. And those themes are, I mean, for lack of a better word, the themes are just life. But there's always, you know, there's always a point to be made. We're talking about, you know, slam poetry covering topics like politics, education, racial inequality, gender inequality, LGBTQ issues, you know, homelessness, hunger, addiction. I mean, it's like the abortion, you know, the death penalty, birth control. It's all the things. But, you know, making a statement of some sort about all the things. And, you know, I think slam poetry, people participate in it, you know, probably first because they, you know, they want to show off their skill, but also because there is that audience participation to get the feedback, to hone their skills. But I think it's also just about having your voice heard and bringing awareness to all different types of really heavy topics that affect all of us in some way. And so we had this connection between slam poetry and rap music last week due to like sort of the battle nature. But I think even the themes are similar as well. And so I think this song in particular, Brenda's Got a Baby, it touches on a lot of those themes. Maybe not directly. Some of it is very indirect, how he's touching on some of those themes. But I mean, we have education, we have poverty, we have sexual abuse, we have, you know, lack of birth control, teenage pregnancy, drugs, prostitution, you know, lack of support from the community, lack of support from the family. I mean, for a relatively short song, man, it packs a big punch. He hits on so many important topics in these lyrics. And I think that's what makes the song so powerful and interesting. Because on the surface, it just sounds like a story about Brenda. But it's really so much more than that. It's the story of poverty. And, you know, I would imagine in particular poverty in the way that it affects the black community. But, you know, I think that even taking race out of it, I think there's still some issues in here that it's poverty in general. And then you bring the racial component back in, and it's even more compounded. And, you know, it is not just a song about Brenda. Brenda is almost a symbol. She represents all the young people growing up in those communities. It's a pretty brilliant song, actually. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and when you do the journal assignment, you are going to be asked, you know, a little bit about slam poetry, what I discussed, the themes of slam poetry, and then just the typical journal questions, you know, what did you agree with? Did anything surprise you? What did you learn about this song or about poetry in general? And just, I really want to hear your thoughts on it, you know, thinking about everything that he touched on and how he presented all of these issues to us in this song. If you have any questions, let me know. If you run into any technical difficulties, definitely let me know. Otherwise, I look forward to reading your journals this week.